Economists are excited these days because Bitcoin is crashing, right? Even in the newspapers, they ridicule me a lot. And among my Facebook friends, there are many who have studied economics, saying Bitcoin can never become a currency. They often make a statement like this. When you hear about Bitcoin, you probably have these questions in mind. You might be thinking, is Bitcoin a currency? There are people who see it as currency or not, like you guys and economists. But what I heard today is that most investors don't care about that kind of stuff. If you invest in something, it's only about whether you'll make money or not. There's a way to look at it like that, and people like me look at it from this perspective. Will Bitcoin change the world? Is this a technology that will change the world? But there are also people around us who are normative, who value morality, and who see everything as being moral or not, good or bad. Those people say Bitcoin is evil. Why? If you ask why, they say, it is often used for money laundering and bad purposes. That's what they say. With all these approaches, one question keeps bothering you. Is Bitcoin a currency? Economists confidently say, Bitcoin cannot be a currency. Well, let's hear what economists think. Why is Bitcoin not a currency? What is the function of a currency? The functions of money, the three main functions. Money is a medium of exchange, like when you buy coffee with Bitcoin. If you can, Bitcoin is used as a medium of exchange, and it stores value. What? Bitcoin's price fluctuates a lot. Is this normal? Answer me. How can something worth $80,000 become $40,000 overnight? Tell me about it. Anyway, money should store value. And the third function, recording ledgers with Bitcoin, like I spent 0.0001 Bitcoin today, or received 0.00015. Who on earth writes like this? Don't. People who use Bitcoin write in $1 or dollars? Who measures with Bitcoin? They don't. So Bitcoin is not a medium of exchange. You can't buy coffee with it. The second, store of value, and the price is too volatile to be a unit of account, so Bitcoin is not a currency. Good conclusion. That's a logical conclusion. So now I ask, the economist, what currency satisfies all three of these? If there is any in human history, please tell me. I can ask this because that's what I studied. If an ordinary person were to ask this question, people who have studied economics would avoid answering, or would not give an answer. They might even lie. They'll talk about gold, the dollar, and stuff, but it's all nonsense. They can't say that to someone like me who studied economics, because I know it doesn't exist. You can't fool an expert, right? Tell me a currency that satisfies all three. Think about it, everyone. What about the dollar? Do you use the dollar as a medium of exchange? In Korea, is it used as a means of exchange in Korea? No, it's not. But who can dare say the dollar is not money? It is used when you go abroad, and it is used in international trade. So, there is no money in the world. That is used as a medium of exchange in every situation. In other words, there is no world currency. You can think of it this way. There is no global currency in the post-1945 system, called the Bretton Woods system. It had existed before that. In the past, gold coins served as world currency, and silver coins served as world currency. But now the dollar is not the world currency. It's a reserve currency. Since each country seeks monetary sovereignty, each country uses its own currency as a means of transaction, and the dollar is used as a means of trade, or as a means of transaction between countries. There is a difference between a world currency and a reserve currency. The thing is there a currency that is a store of value? We don't use gold these days. Since gold is not currency, even if it is a store of value, it should be excluded for now. Real estate stores value, but it's not used as currency. Who buys bread with real estate? No one goes shopping at a department store with real estate. So real estate isn't a currency either. You store value in $1 or dollars, and it makes sense if you store value for a week or a month. But who stores value for 10 years with dollars? They do it with stocks or gold, right? So there's a truth that economists aren't telling you. That's what they always do. When they attack Bitcoin, they say as if the dollar is the ideal currency, as if the one is the ideal currency. And then they say that Bitcoin isn't a currency. But think about the functions of a currency as the accounting unit. Dollars and won are both great units of accounting, but if you actually dig deeper into accounting, this is a very difficult question. In fact, accounting is a philosophy, and it is how we express the corporate value of Samsung Electronics in numbers. But that doesn't mean much. What is Samsung's corporate value? All the money in Samsung? That would be ridiculous, because Samsung has more than cash assets. Then, is the value of Samsung the sum of all the real estate and cash assets that Samsung owns? That would be absurd too, because Samsung has a brand value. Now you see where I'm taking you. How much is the Samsung brand, if you ask? Magazines like Forbes and research institutes around the world, they will value the Samsung brand down to the last penny. Don't fall for it. Does it make sense to value the brand down to the last penny? It doesn't make sense. How absurd is this measurement? We measure things when buying bean sprouts, buying parsley, watching movies, or paying for college. But corporate value? Come on. It's hard to measure the exact value of real estate as well. When it comes to something abstract like corporate value, we just write it as a number on a ledger, which causes a lot of problems. It leads you to misunderstand the company's value and give false information. It doesn't mean much to say. How much is Samsung, if we say that? Money is something that measures accurately, serves as a means of exchange, and stores value. Mankind has never had such a currency. Will there be one in the future? Let's not be bound by dogma. Let's not be bound by ideals set by economists. Of course we need ideals, so that mankind can create civilization, trade, and prosper. But an ideal currency is an impossible dream. It's the same as a problem in mathematics. That has no solution. There is no answer. I'm not trying to say that. If Bitcoin is not a currency, dollar is not a currency either. I'm trying to say that. Although economists claim Bitcoin is not a currency, they too haven't found a truly ideal currency. You could say that. Bitcoin is a relatively worse currency because it fluctuates more than the dollar or won. Well, I can agree with that to some extent. Bitcoin may be acceptable as a medium of exchange or a unit of account, but it creates problems when it comes to storing value. In fact, the reason Bitcoin is so popular among the public is because it is a store of value. The reason I have been telling my acquaintances to buy Bitcoin for the past 7 years is because Bitcoin serves as a store of value. I'm not saying that buying Bitcoin will make you rich overnight, but if you have Bitcoin, you can protect your assets. The reason is that there are too few Bitcoins. In 2014, 21 million will be mined, and the supply will end. There are already many of them out there. Currently, more than 19 million have been mined, but many of them will never be out in the open market. Because at first, unlike other crypto, Bitcoin had no value. There were many people who started mining for fun. No one mines Ethereum for fun. They mine Ethereum for profit. But many people mined Bitcoins for fun in the past. Some of them later threw away the entire computer, or some even died. These are called lost coins, and out of the 19 million currently in circulation, at least 2 million, and at most 6 million are believed to be lost. So in fact, you have to subtract 2 or 3 million out of 19 million. So there are 16 million of them now, and you will see 18 million or 19 million of them in your lifetime, and people will continue to lose some of them. If you suddenly pass away, your bank won't recover your Bitcoins for your family. Your offspring won't inherit them. So there are only 16 or 17 million Bitcoins, which is a very small number. This is a story that people around me pay attention to. You know, even people who hate Bitcoin will change their minds a little bit when they hear this story. 10 years from now, in 10 years, it will be difficult to find anyone around you who owns a single Bitcoin. Why? They don't usually move around much. If they go out during the day, they'll be in a luxurious car. They don't walk much on the street. Why? One Bitcoin will be worth an enormous amount of money. Ordinary people cannot own one Bitcoin. Of course, Bitcoin is not like a physical coin, so it can be divided infinitely. It can be divided into 1/100th millionth, and it can be divided even further. So, you can have 0.1 or 0.01, but it would be very difficult to have one whole Bitcoin, because the numbers are too small. What about as a store of value? As for storing value, Bitcoin is much more powerful than real estate. It's true that real estate functions to some extent as a store of value, but real estate is not uniform in every area. Do you know why real estate can't be a currency? It's because of fungibility. In terms of currency, the $10 bill I have and the $10 bill you have are the same. But in terms of real estate, even if it's an apartment in New York, can you live in two different apartments there every other day or even swap them? No, you can't. They each have their own unique characteristics. If there are unique characteristics of each apartment in New York, what about nationwide and worldwide? Can I exchange an apartment in New York for an apartment in Seoul valued at the same price? Do you see it happening? No, you don't. How about Bitcoin? This high-value Bitcoin is exchanged one-to-one because it is the same. Tell me an example of a case where such expensive items are exchanged one-to-one. What would it be? Tell me an example of something close to 100,000 being exchanged one-to-one without any problem. Diamonds? No, they are all individually unique. Pyramids? Paintings? Ceramics? None. Think about it. Gold bullion? Gold bullion. It's quite possible. Let's compare the monetary characteristics of Bitcoin and gold. Why is Bitcoin a better currency than gold? Can you cut a gold bar? Can you cut it with a saw? Can you grind gold into powder and use it to pay for a taxi fare? Or can you go to a bakery and buy some bread with it? Grinding gold bars into powder is ridiculous, but it is possible for Bitcoin. You don't believe it, do you? But you'll be giving and receiving 0.00001 Bitcoins in the future. I have taken the economist's premise that Bitcoin is not a currency. But as you think about it, Bitcoin has a very strong monetary character as a store of value, right? It can be exchanged one-to-one worldwide and then split. Besides the function of money, scholars have been thinking about the conditions to be money. There are materials and specific properties of them that can be used as money. It'll be helpful to memorize these 5 things. These are not the functions of currency, as I said before. These are conditions for a currency that can take on the function of a currency, whether it is a physical material or something else. First, it must be divisible. Then, it must be one-to-one, exchangeable, and fungible. Third, it has to be durable, rare, and lightweight to be transportable. Think about it. Which is more monetary, rice or a cow? Rice because it is divisible. Right? Then I ask you, which is more monetary, rice or cigarette? It's cigarette, which is easy to transport. That's why cigarettes are better currency. Our ancestors have taught us with wisdom that cigarettes are the best currency. In fact, cigarettes have stronger monetary traits than gold. How do you know that? After World War II, Marlboro was used as currency in Germany, not gold. Why? Gold and silver would have been traded only between very rich people. But in everyday life, you can't trade gold powder for something like buying a bottle of milk. But you can exchange Marlboro cigarettes for milk. I told this to my friend when I found Bitcoin. I sat him down next to me and said, "This is between you and me. I can't talk about it outside. I can't even write it in my book. I can't say this to others because if I said this, I'd be labeled as a crazy man. They would say, that guy is nuts. But I'll tell you, Bitcoin is the most ideal money that mankind has been looking for." But he wasn't impressed at all. Why do you think I said it is an ideal currency? Look, first, Bitcoin can be divided infinitely. Fungibility. I said it was universal. Wherever you go in the universe, 1 Bitcoin is 1 Bitcoin. It's not heavy, it's light. What else? Durability. Do rats eat it? Do they spoil? Do they have mold? Then what is the best thing about Bitcoin? Scarcity. Okay, these 5. In human history, from Adam and Eve to now, there was no such thing. And as long as there is a human race, there will be Bitcoin. You know, an ideal thing has to be mathematical. An ideal area should not have volume, and an ideal point should not have length. The ideal has to be mathematical. So in fact, when we think of the ideal currency, it has to be mathematical. You didn't know this? I didn't know this. But all the Western philosophers knew this. If an ideal currency is to emerge, it must be mathematical. Why? To satisfy these 5 conditions, it has to be mathematical. It shouldn't have flesh and blood like us. It shouldn't have a form. So they finally created a mathematical one. an ideal one, which is Bitcoin. This is what I realized while reading the Bitcoin white paper in 2014. Now, when you look at Bitcoin, you might think, could it be possible? In fact, this is not an empirical thing. This needs to be thought through. Do you get it? 5 conditions for an ideal currency. It must be lightweight, divisible, fungible, durable, and scarce. Bitcoin has all 5, which makes it an ideal currency. Economists actually have nothing to say to this. Why? Bitcoin may seem to have many disadvantages compared to the dollar, but it has tremendous advantages compared to gold, rice, or cows. In addition, when you look at the material properties of Bitcoin, it has all the conditions of an ideal currency that scholars and humanists thought of. Actually, this is the domain of humanists, rather than economists. Humanists who studied the use of cigarettes as currency. To the question of whether Bitcoin is a currency, the Bitcoin camp can answer like this academically. But that's not what I really want to say. This is the story I really want to tell you. Why does it matter whether Bitcoin is a currency or not? Bitcoin is worth $40,000 now. When Bitcoin was worth $400, $500, or $1,000, it was okay to say Bitcoin is not a currency, or Bitcoin will just end up like tulip mania. I get it, but let's assume Bitcoin isn't the currency that economists think it is. Let's just forget everything I've said so far. Bitcoin is not a currency, okay, but Bitcoin is still there. Then, you have to ask another question. Don't repeat this strange 3-stage argument. Bitcoin is not a currency, so Bitcoin is a tulip bubble. Bitcoin will disappear eventually. If Bitcoin is not a currency, then what is it? What is Bitcoin? First of all, Bitcoin is Bitcoin. We can't say whether Bitcoin is a currency or not. Why? Bitcoin is not a tulip bubble. Bitcoin is not a currency, but it's not a tulip bubble either. If Bitcoin had been a tulip bubble, it would not have survived until now, and its price would have crashed. So what should you be asking? What will I cover in the future? Bitcoin is something important. Bitcoin is very important in your life. What will you tell your grandchildren? Grandpa, what did you do during the internet boom? I was busy using the internet during the internet boom. Grandma, what did you do during the smartphone boom? Smartphone? That was really nice. I'm sorry that I just enjoyed it. Grandpa, what did you do when you found Bitcoin? I cursed Bitcoin since it was not a currency. I stopped everyone from buying Bitcoin. Why do you suppose your grandson would say? He would probably say, my grandparents are hopeless. Does it matter to you what the internet is? No. What matters is realizing its importance. Does it matter to you what a smartphone is? No. What matters is realizing its importance. You guys love your smartphone the most in the world. How do I know that? You always look at it. Are you looking at your partner's face or looking at your smartphone? You're looking at your smartphone. Smartphones are important. Bitcoin too. It's very important. That's it. Bitcoin is important. That's it.